It's time to get to the truth. Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Right Opinion, the home of a twat with too much free time. And my relationship with the media, not a very rosy one to say the least. And yes, over the coming few minutes, exactly why I have gripes with them will become fairly self-explanatory. I'm sure if you're familiar with my channel, you'll know where I stand. And if you're new here, welcome, and I sincerely apologise for being acquainted under such unfortunate circumstances. Let's talk about those circumstances. This good old gent is Post Malone. He's an interesting specimen, but all in all, he gets a pass from me just about. Maybe it wasn't the best that we met on the song called White Iverson, which I still don't really get to this day, but I enjoy Congratulations and also Rockstar. He has a unique style, and there's a certain mood that some of his music suits for me, so I get it at least, though it's understandable that a fair few people find him rather insufferable. On the personal side, he seems alright. He seems quite integrated in a community of fairly chill people. He's very personal and seems like a down-to-earth guy. It's more than fair to say that he has made some rather ridiculous remarks, particularly about hip-hop music, and was justifiably criticised for them. They were generalised and poorly thought out. He addressed it, he lamented it, water under the bridge, life goes on. I continue to slowly decompose in my chair. But recently Post Malone landed himself in more hot water after a few articles began publishing this one quote and plastering it over Twitter, because that's what gets the clicks these days. Now these news outlets have latched onto the fact that 80% of Twitter don't really feel like reading articles, but more elicit pleasure from being outraged at the face value quote. So the hounds were inevitably waiting when in an interview he said there's a struggle being a white rapper. This was perfect material for the gutter websites to once again plaster such a provocative quote all over Twitter and subsequently cause a whirlwind of outrage from people who saw the quote and assumed the worst. What did they assume then? Well, what they assumed is that it was some white boy crying about oppression. And of course, when you have a title like that, it's gonna happen. Now, I don't know if people took it directly out of context or read one of the insufficient articles attempting to somehow compress the situation into a rather simple take of privilege, but I hope to explain why all this is rather out of proportion and quite detrimental to the whole discussion we're trying to have. One of these painfully underwritten articles was on Wrap Up, a 21st century hip-hop magazine. It just slathered the quote down, threw some people reacting in a rather upset manner, and spoke about other controversies and closed off the article. This was also the first article that I had the pleasure of becoming acquainted to within this situation, so being the curious chap that I am, I decided to look at the original article. I thought to myself, I know that Post Malone is no wordsmith, but I do not believe that he is under the impression that he is being fundamentally deprived of privileges that any other rapper would find accessible. And lo and behold, surprise surprise, it was completely taken out of context. The original interview was with GQ magazine, who also chose a rather unflattering title that gives me flashbacks to a simpler time in internet history. But reading the article, it is about a conversation between an astute interviewer and Post, with the former delving into the mind of a very interesting man. It is actually a great article written by someone who clearly wants to understand Post's point of view, but also wants to get Post to understand his, and that mutual empathy really drives a thoughtful piece. So what about this white rapper question? Well, when pulled up in context, what he says is a lot better understood. Firstly, acknowledging the question and the response after, it's clear that what he meant was that it was hard as a white rapper because it's hard to utilize the genre while maintaining that you're not exploiting it, especially given the recent political context. He's looking at his own position from one of scrutiny, that there is a level of sensitivity that is tough as a white rapper to approach the genre. I think that's fairly well acknowledged truth within hip-hop, but the way everyone makes it seem is that he's some privileged white boy throwing his toys out the pram, which from every account is blatantly untrue. Now that's not to say he's entirely right, although I'd say he's more of a warbler than a rapper. He does have to acknowledge that he's using elements of hip-hop, and he definitely leans more towards the genre, regardless of whether he does want to make just quote-unquote music. The lyrical composition and so on do reflect that sort of culture. Once again, if that's my only gripe, then it's not a big deal. I find that we're conflating the idea of hip-hop and rap too closely. Malone is definitely hip-hop, but I find his performance rather variant than a typical rapper, and although it's a grey area, both points of view are understandable. So with that in mind, is this continued shallow witch hunt really justified, or is it just another attempt to pick off someone who's upset a few individuals? And now those people have made it their life goal to sink this harmless twat. As the author said, it's clear that Post Malone isn't perfect, but he is willing to learn. I don't know why all these articles on Post Malone in particular piss me off, because I've always been aware of it, but it pushed me over the edge eventually, how much people on both sides are only paying attention to titles rather than actually what is written in them. And the titles are understandable, it's clickbait, what isn't clickbait anymore, but it provokes this false outrage that perpetuates through social media sites, and it leads to this unnecessary hatred of icons who could actually learn themselves. These people who have a lot of vitriol want to go after this man, Post Malone. He is no threat. He's just a guy with a careless tongue and naive mind. And I do think we should be somewhat mindful when reading such charged titles because they may not mean what they appear to. And that's what matters. I do not mind clickbait. I do not mind quotes. I've done it myself. But you have to make sure that what they say is what they mean. It is more down to the viewer rather than the publication at this point. I don't like media, I'm never gonna like media, but they do what they do for a reason, and you have to understand that. So rather than just having these expectations, you just look into it more. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I wanted to cover this because I think there is a greater point to be taken away, maybe even for me to keep in mind in the future. I'm sure I've jumped the gun a few times, but when someone's reputation seems to be the one under scrutiny, I find I take it a bit more seriously, and this just appeared to be the right time to address it. Maybe I'll do more in the future talking about this stuff. We'll see how this video performs. Is Post Malone suffering from anti-white privilege in the evil rap genre, or should he be burned to the stake for his culture theft? Let me know down below. Until then, I'm The Right Opinion, and I'll see you in the next one.